this ultimate.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Which are these ultimate simples, right? Make sense? That's the Abhidharma, the basic Buddhist view of the two truths, right? As it was elaborated in the first few centuries. I think there are even canonical reference in the Pali Canon, but I'm not completely sure about that, about the two truths. But anyway, in the early Buddhist tradition, two truths were elaborated as this way to understand what is ultimately real and understand also the validity of conventional object, which is basically cashed out in terms of the dharmas, right? So that's straightforward. So Nagarjuna uses the same scheme, but understand it very differently, right? And that's the kind of foundation of Madhyamaka as, if we can say it's a system, right? So the two truths for Madhyamaka, we talked about this last time, right? There is all the objects, all the things. And then there are, when we look for these things, what do we find? We don't find anything, right? And that not finding is the emptiness of these objects. And that's what's called the ultimate truth, right? And that's a two truth in Madhyamaka, right? But the two truth in Madhyamaka is really quite different from the two truth in Abhidharma, in basic Buddhism, because it's not that there is a surface level reality and then there is a deeper reality, right? No, there is only one reality, which is the conventional reality, right? That's the reality. That's the only reality we can have, if you want to say that. And then when we really look how these things exist, we don't find them. And that's the nisvabhavata, the absence of svabhava, of intrinsic nature. And that's what we understand to be emptiness, right? And that's the two truths in Madhyamaka, right? And so the conventional reality, the conventional truths, are said to be deceptive. There is 3 gloss on this is in the text. Yeah, for number 12. You can find that on page 272. This is where Chandrakirti talks about the 3 meanings of conventional, right? Concealing, meaning deceptive, mutually dependent or dependent, and the object of linguistic designation, right? That's a 3 meaning of samvriti, which we usually translate as conventional, right? So the 13th chapter is take on this idea that conventional truths, conventional realities are deceptive, right? And so it asked the question, what is conventional truth deceptive of, right? So this is on page 138. The Blessed One said that whatever is deceptive in nature is vain, and that all composite things being deceptive in nature, they are vain, right? So that's basic Buddhism. Whatever is deceptive in nature is not worth being attached, right? All composite things are deceptive in nature. They are vain, right? So the question is, what does it mean to be deceptive, right? And this is the second stanza. If the Buddha statement, whatever is deceptive in nature is vain, is true, then what is there about which one is deceived? This was said by the Blessed One for the illumination of emptiness. So this is the idea that we shouldn't think about conventional truth being deceptive as hiding a deeper level of reality. There is not conventional truth and then a deeper level of reality. All what there is conventional truth, conventional object, as they being empty. This is the only thing we can talk about, right? So it's not like we have a superficial truth, a reality, and a deeper reality like we have in the Abhidharma. Rather, there is only one reality, which is conventional reality, and that conventional reality is deceptive because it presents itself to us as real, but as having some kind of intrinsic nature. But in fact, it does not have that kind of intrinsic nature because when we look for it, we don't find it. So, conventional truth is not deceptive with relation to a deeper truth. It is itself deceptive because we misperceive conventional realities and we see it as being real, as having some kind of intrinsic nature, and that's why conventional reality is deceptive, right? In a way, you could say that by itself is neither deceptive nor not deceptive, but it's just in relation to us ordinary beings who tend to reify things that we encounter, and therefore we take these conventional realities to have some kind of intrinsic nature. And when we look for that intrinsic nature, we don't find such nature. And that's the ultimate truth of that conventional reality, right? So this is what Nagarjuna is saying, and that's very important to understand what emptiness, to understand emptiness, because emptiness is not some kind of deeper truth that we need to understand. Emptiness is a cure. It's not like things are kind of hidden and we need to find what's really going on there, right? What we need to do is to cure us from this grasping to things as being really there. And so emptiness is not some kind of deeper truth which is hidden to us. is just a cure, right? This is why there is no emptiness and conventional truth, but really the only reality there is conventional reality, right? That's a reality, that's the only reality we have. Emptiness is just the fact that that our way of conceiving reality is mistaken, right? That the way we see reality as having some kind of intrinsic nature, like we see reality in terms of things, right? That's quite misleading, right? Because things are actually much more processed than things, right? But we have this way of understanding, of relating to reality on the basis of cutting reality into these things, right? And that's our problem. And emptiness is the cure for that problem. And so we should move away from the Abhidharma view of reality, of the two truths, which is two levels of reality. Rather, there is only one level. That's conventional reality, right? And that conventional reality has no intrinsic nature, meaning when we find how things really are, we don't find them. And that's the emptiness of this object, right? And this emptiness is not like a separate kind of reality. Does it make sense? So, this is why, and now we can jump to page 144. We approach from the culmination. 7, if something that is non-empty existing, then something that is empty might also exist. Nothing whatsoever exists that is non-empty. How will the empty come to be, to exist? So this is pretty much what I tried to explain, meaning we shouldn't think of the two truths as conventional objects and emptiness as being kind of two realities, right? Because it's not the emptiness of the part and the part itself are not separated, right? They are not different, right? They are one and the same thing, if you want to say. It's two ways to see reality, right? One which is in terms of our daily interactions through our prism that kind of cuts reality into these things. And the other is when we think about whether what we see is really there or not, and we realize that what we see is really not completely there, because when we look for how things are, we don't find anything at all, right? And so the part and the emptiness of the part are together, right? They are one and the same thing. And that's why if something that is non-empty existed, then something that is empty might also exist, right? We shouldn't think of emptiness as being more real than the part, right? The emptiness of the part is not more real. The reason it's called ultimate, well, there are a few reasons, but one reason is that the emptiness of the object, of any object, is called ultimate truth because it's the ultimately valuable reality, right? Why is it ultimately valuable? Because when we immerse ourselves, when we familiarize ourselves with this reality, with this truth, we get better, right? We undo the ignorance, we undo the grasping that we have to things, particularly to this fundamental distinction that we make between self and others. And so emptiness is ultimate truth because it's the ultimately valuable truth for us, right? Presumably for the Buddha, it's not particularly valuable because the Buddha doesn't need emptiness, right? He sees things as they are. And so emptiness is valuable really for us because we are prisoners of these false ways of understanding reality, right? And so nothing whatsoever exists that is non-empty, then how will the empty come to be, right? Okay, so what we need to understand is the 8th stanza, which basically summarize the whole thing. And it says, emptiness is taught by the conquerors and be expedient to get rid of all views. But those for whom emptiness is a view have been called incurable, right? And, sorry. So this is pretty much what I was talking about, right? Emptiness is ultimately valuable. It is what we find when we look for how things are, but it is not some kind of ultimate, absolute reality, right? It's not some kind of deeper level of reality we have to see. Rather, it's just the fact that when we look for something, we don't find it, and that's its emptiness. But this emptiness is no more real than the thing of which it is the emptiness, right? And so it's not some kind of more real reality. It's just the fact that when we look for the reality of conventional objects, we don't find it, right? We come up empty, and that's the emptiness of the object, right? And when we look, and so we may be tempted to say, aha, this is what's really real, but that would be just repeating the mistake, because when we look for the emptiness of the pot, we don't find it either, and that's the emptiness of the emptiness, right? And so it's not the fact that there is some kind of deeper, more real reality. Rather, it is the fact that reality, the reality we have, the only reality we have, which is conventional, is kind of evanescent, right? It's not how we think it is. It doesn't have this kind of solidity that we think it has. And that lack of solidity, the fact that we don't find it when we look for it, that is its emptiness. And that's a reality that is ultimately valuable, right? But it's not something we can hold to either, because emptiness is not its own, it's not how things are, right? It's not the deeper reality. Emptiness is how conventional reality are, but then when we look for emptiness, we don't find it either, right? And so that's the emptiness of emptiness. And so Nagarjuna conclude, where is that? Sorry. Oh. Emptiness is taught by the conquerors as the expedient to get rid of all views, right? Emptiness is not a kind of separate reality. It's not how things, it's not like a deeper absolute way in which things exist. It's just an expedient means to a skillful means to allow us to get rid of all our views, meaning all our views grasping to things as being really real, right? Make sense? So the example which is often given is that of a purgative. It's not like a purgative is particularly great thing, but it can be really useful, right? And so emptiness is like, the view of emptiness is like a purgative. It purges you of this clinging to reality, to things as having some kind of real existence. And so it does the job. And that's why it's ultimate truth, because it's the ultimate truth we can get about how things are, right? The ultimate truth we can get about how things are is that things are, we can't find how they are, right? And that's the emptiness, and that's not particularly valuable thing, except we have this real distortion of seeing reality. And that's why it is particularly important for us, because it's going to free us from this clinging that we have to things, and particularly to this fundamental distinction that we make between self and others, right? And that's a root of suffering, right? And so to get better, we need to use the purgative and purge ourselves from this clinging by immersing us repeatedly into this way of looking for reality and coming up empty, not finding anything at all, right? And so for what Nagarjuna seemed to be saying is that emptiness is just a skillful means, right? It's just aimed at curing us of the disease. And we should never think of it as being real, because when we think that emptiness is how really things are, then we kind of reintroduce the sickness, right? And so it's as if we took a purgative and thought that purgative is the best thing there is. Yeah, it does the job, but that's all what we can say, the purgative is not intrinsically valuable, right? And so this is the same for the view of reality. So to conclude, page 247, this is what Nagarjuna said. This is the same meaning. It is empty. So on page 247, stanza 11, it is empty is not to be said, nor it is not empty, nor that it is both, nor that it's neither. Empty is said only for the sake of instruction. So when we say things like all dharma are empty, we should understand that this is a slogan, right? This is a slogan which is trying to remind us that we should not reify things. We should not reify this distinction that we make between self and other. This is what is important. It's not like things that really empty. No, it's not. This is clinging again to emptiness. Emptiness is just this skillful means, right? That is helping us to kind of unhook ourselves from the mistaken reality in which we live. And that's why we suffer, according to Buddhism. Okay, questions?
I think you said that I had some questions about the Abhidharma view.
Yes.
And I just wanted to make sure that I understood it a little bit better. I think you said that there are two realities, two conventional truths, a conventional truth and an ultimate truth.
Yes.
But I think I heard you say that the partless particles were conventionalities, and
no, they're not.
Okay, okay, then I misunderstood.
They're the ultimate symbols, right?
Mm-hmm.
When
the
we look,
ultimate symbols, did you say?
Yeah,
Okay.
ultimate symbols.
I see.
Yeah, because in a way, what is most important here is not so much the Abhidharma description of what the dharmas are. What is most important is the intellect, the approach of the Abhidharma to reality, right? Mm-hmm. And that approach is to look for things in terms of parts and wholes, and to notice that we don't find anything, but to argue that there is an end to the search, right? And that's what I call the ultimate symbols, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so it could be in terms of physical object, it right. could be partless particles, whatever that means. It doesn't right. matter in a way. The precise description of this is this kind of atom or so on. No, that doesn't matter, right? What is really significant is the idea that there is a bottom to the search, right? Mm-hmm. There is a ground, there is a solid ground that I can get in touch to at some point.
Right.
And that's what's really real. And that's what I call the ultimate, or the ultimate symbols, right? Because they cannot be decomposed in terms of parts and wholes anymore. And so that's the Abhidharma understanding, or the basic Buddhist understanding of the two truths, right? And so Nagarjuna takes that and transforms these two truths into something quite different, because now there is no bottom anymore, right? There is no ground. It goes all the way.
It's turtles all the way down.
Yes, exactly. It's turtle all the way down. There is no bottom, there is no ground. It's all kind of, we are all in a conventional reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where there is the only reality that we have, right? And our problem is that we misconceive it, we misunderstand it. Our way of, our cognitive schemas are mistaken, and therefore we reify this reality. And so emptiness is a teaching which is trying to break this way of relating to reality, right?
I think I understand.
Professor, is it still referred to as the two truths then with Nagarjuna? I mean,
What's
I think
that?
last time you called it a one-tier ontology, but it's still called the two truths, even
Oh,
though
it's a two truth, yeah, because there is ultimate truth, right? But it's one tier ontology because there is only, in a way, in terms of realities, there is only conventional reality, right? And then there is the emptiness of this conventional reality, but it's not like it's a deeper reality or a separate reality, right?
Okay.
And so it's a one-tier ontology. We are at sea, right? And there is no bottom.
Okay.
And the only thing we can do is to realize that we are at sea and there is no bottom, right? And then we'll be better. Or we will be completely depressed, but hopefully we'll be better. Just kidding.
And this is Nagarjuna's response to the Madhyamakas.
Yes, this is, and Nagarjuna kind of steal the two truth schema to respond to the obvious one that, well, if everything is empty, then nothing exists, right? And there is no distinction between virtue, non-virtue, karma, and its fruits don't exist, and all this qualm that we saw in the 24th chapter on the Four Noble Truths, right? And so he's a pretty smart guy. So he take that schema and then really change it quite drastically. And that's the basis on which we have to understand Madhyamaka, right?
What did they feel grounded? It certainly is very grounding.
Which one?
Nagarjuna.
Nagarjuna is grounding?
No,
I don't know.
well, it's interesting. That's when I hear you speaking in this way, which is different than the way I've generally been taught, I find it very grounding, very subduing, peaceful.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, it's
not complicated.
Yeah, grounding. I guess we use the word differently, right?
Right.
Yeah, I understand.
Usually you think everything, when we talk this way, has no ground, is groundless. So then you're
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Right.
And that groundlessness brings us some, once we give up the search, we can be more at peace, right? The problem is the illusion, right? Once we start to pierce through the illusion, then yes, we can be more at rest, right?
Yeah.
So that's Nagarjuna in short. 4 lessons. That's pretty short. It gives you an idea, I think, how the text works, right? The most important part of the text is the taking apart of these different notions, such as causality, movement, and so on, right? And then there are other chapters like the 24th and like the 13th and like the 22nd, which then are trying to kind of manage the whole Madhyamaka enterprise, right? And the way to manage the whole Madhyamaka enterprise is through the idea of the two truths. And through the idea of the two truths, you can kind of bring some kind of order to the whole enterprise, because the whole enterprise could go wrong, right? This is why it's called the middle way. Because if you go left, you fall into one extreme. If you go right, you fall into another extreme, reification, nihilism, and so on. So in order for us not to fall apart, not to fall into one of these extremes, Nagarjuna provides us this kind of schema of the two truths, right? And that's a way in which we can manage this enterprise.
I don't see where the hand raising icon is.
Yeah, Professor, at least one,
Well, you have
Snake
no,
has her hand up.
I see, but you have no picture. Some of you have no picture, and so I don't think you can raise your.
Yeah. Sorry, but I was looking for the icon.
Yeah, I know you.
That's under reactions.
It's under reactions, yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
go to the bottom of your screen to the menu, and on the right.
Yeah.
Now I have my hand up. Oh, yes, I did. So
You disappeared again, but keep going.
I just have one question. When we say like emptiness or selflessness, doesn't
Yeah.
that imply existence?
Well, no, not really.
Because it has to be the emptiness of what, right? Of something.
Yes,
Selfless.
but emptiness by itself implies nothing. It's a simple absence, right?
Okay, selflessness.
Selflessness is the same. It's a simple absence, right? It's the fact that when we look for self, we don't find it, right? And so now this simple absence can be meditated in different ways, but by itself it's just a simple not finding, right?
But a not finding of what?
Not finding of any of what we are looking for. When we're looking for an entity, we don't find it, right?
So doesn't an entity exist?
Well, no, it doesn't. It's neither exists nor does not exist, right? Because when we look for it, we don't find it. But it's not nothing either. And that's what the middle way is all about, right? Is trying to find this way of relating to reality in terms that constantly undermine these binary oppositions, right?
With a happy smile.
Hopefully. Yeah, I think it's very freeing. It's very freeing. And that's why I think it's, that teaching actually is, you find it in the Pali Canon already. So it's not that Nagarjuna invents something that was not taught, but obviously he developed it, elaborated, and so on. And so that's why he's a great Buddhist thinker, right? And he definitely is. Now, the difficulty that is going to happen after Nagarjuna is to understand what are the implications, what do we mean by conventional truth? What are the implications when we think about reality in terms of conventional truth? What kind of knowledge is possible if the only reality, if there is that there is only conventional truth? What kind of ethics is possible? What kind of morality is possible? That's what's going to be hashed out between followers of Nagarjuna. Notice that in the book, you can look the whole book, Nagarjuna doesn't really say very much about these problems, right? Now, there is another text which is attributed to him and probably by him, but who knows, which is the Vigraha Bhavatani, the refutation of debates. And there is more about knowledge, but basically it is going to be his follower Chandrakirti and Bhava Viveka who are going to debate this issue about conventional truth, right? And so that's beyond the text. That's not Nagarjuna, that's his followers, right? Nagarjuna by himself doesn't seem, well, this is what he offers, right? And a lot of taking apart of various concepts and a way to manage this endeavor through the scheme of the two truths. That's Nagarjuna. Questions?
Professor, there are two people who have their hands raised.
I have you.
Hi,
and
Professor Dreyfus. Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Was someone
Oh,
speaking?
yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
So my question was actually about what you were just speaking about, which is in Nagarjuna's world, where there's only conventional reality, and some of us were discussing this yesterday, you know, what can you say about conventional reality? And we were discussing, you know, Lama Tsongkhapa's 3 criteria for establishing conventional valid
yes.
existence.
Yes.
And so what we were discussing and trying to figure out is,
this is the most difficult issue, but it's not Nagarjuna, right? I want to make clear,
yeah,
this is not Nagarjuna.
right,
This is later people
right,
who kind of develop and systematize the Nagarjuna's teachings, right? Because Nagarjuna is really interested mostly in taking apart, deconstructing various notions and giving us a way to kind of keep things going, not to fall into one of the two extremes, right? And that's basically all what he does. And so later thinker like Bhava Viveka and Chandrakirti, and later on in Tibet, various masters such as Tsongkhapa, Shakya Chogden, and others have kind of kept thinking about, yeah, what are the consequences, right? Yes.
So this is where we got mired in I mean, so the first two conditions, you know, that I, as a valid cognizer, say, you know, I have a green pen, and somebody else validates and says, you know, I have a green pen, and then that seems very clear. But what
Yes.
happens when in conventional reality we have opposing views, and there's a whole group of people who says arranged marriage is okay and it's good for society, and another group of people who say arranged marriages are terrible, they're bad for the individual and mental health. So,
Yes.
you know, so now you have a conventional reality where there are many valid cognizers on both sides who have
Yes.
differing points of view, and then where do you end up? And there are so many issues like that. So what do the two criteria help us figure out? Are they talking at a different level? Am I asking the wrong question from
No,
them?
you're asking exactly the right question. And my teacher, Genima, this is the person who taught me Madhyamaka first, and I mean the text, the Mūlamadhyamakakārikā. Genima used to say, this is the most difficult issue in Madhyamaka. Everything else is relatively easy. Once you start learning the tricks, you quickly understand. But what is the really very difficult issue is understanding how to differentiate knowledge or truth from falsity at the conventional level, right? This is the most difficult question for Madhyamaka, because in the Abhidharma, it's easy. You can say, now, in practice, it might be complicated, but at least philosophically, it's easy to understand what's true and what's false, right? What relates to what connects to the ultimate simple is true. What doesn't connect to the ultimate simple is false. End of the story. We don't need to go on very long. We can explain relatively easily what it means for something to be true, right? For a statement to be true. In Madhyamaka, we don't have that, right? And so the question is like, well, it gets very complicated, right? Even if you think about scientific theories, which are true, which are not true, and so on, and that gets complicated. And then it gets even more complicated when you get to ethics, right? Which is what you were talking about, right? And so that's there. Presumably the only thing that, from a Buddhist point of view, the only thing that can help us to decide is scripture, right? Because these are ethical questions and they are not easily solvable by ordinary people. And so if we're Buddhists, we have to commit ourselves to the principles of the Buddhist tradition. And so the principles tells us what is correct or not, right? But when you deal with morality, it's extremely difficult to make decisions. Now, if you think maybe about scientific theories, you can start to think about how scientific theories suffer from contradiction or lack of contradiction, or you can think about the process in which a scientific theory is created and then at first meets a lot of resistance and then gradually overcome all the objections, right? And so that would be a way to think about what it means for something to be conventionally true, right? Meaning it's not contradicted, and scientific theories mean a pretty good candidate for that. and we can see in the science the process unfolding, right? Through which scientific, but obviously this is an ongoing process, right? This is provisional, right? Because something that is thought to be true for 2 centuries suddenly turns out to be false, right? Or to be contradicted. And so, yes, there is no hard criteria. Once you give up the idea of reality, of the idea of a kind of ultimate grounding, when you give up this idea, then in a way you are at sea, right? And there is no easy way to understand what it means to have knowledge of something. Whereas if you think about reality, if you posit a reality like the Abhidharma, if you're a realist, then you can say, well, our theories are true because they approximate reality, right? Yeah, a Madhyamaka cannot say that because there is nothing to approximate, right? Yeah, it's all conventional reality. And so it's all how it's not just what the world understands, but it's also what is not contradicted by other valid approaches. But the question is, well, how do you know that's a valid approach, right? So this is why you have debate between Chandrakirti and Bhava Viveka or about this topic, right?
And
yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, and the other point we were, at least I'm still confused on, is the third criteria for establishing reality. And I've seen it expressed in different ways, and I've not understood the third criteria, that ultimate.
It's not to be contradicted by
ultimate analysis.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Like, what are they getting at?
What they're getting at is that what they're getting at is something, well, if you say you have a view, right? And now one way yeah, if you say do you have a view like this is a pot and this pot is empty, right? And so now this this finding of the pot empty does not negate the conventional reality, right, of the pot. And that's, I think, why you have this third criteria, because some Tibetans, such as Patsap Nimadras, said, no, ultimate truth negates conventional truth. And so Tsongkhapa thinks, no, this is not the right way to go. Now, these 3 criteria are according to Tsongkhapa, right? Who gives us one interpretation of Madhyamaka. But yeah, I think this is good criteria, but you know, they're not set in stone, right? Because there is no stone, right? There is no basis. And so it's at the end of the day, it's all kind of, it's all provisional, right? It's not like there is a final truth, right? It's all ongoing search for what is true and false, right? And we are all at sea, right? Because there is no kind of bedrock to which we can relate ourselves, right?
Okay, thank you.
I don't know who is in charge. You have a hand.
Professor, yes, Amy has a question.
You may have answered this, Professor. I'm sorry I tuned in late, but what I've been struggling with is I think it's been said that it's not until we become enlightened that we understand conventional truth as it is. Am I correct in that? Or at least
no,
you've
you're
reached
not.
the 10th level or the 8th level? I'm not sure which it is.
Well,
And-
when you reach full enlightenment, which I have no idea what it means, but anyway, when you reach full enlightenment, you don't see the two truths apart. You see the two truths together. Now, that's what you're alluding to. Now, you understand conventional truth as conventional when you understand emptiness. So this is completely different, right? Because for the second case, when you understand emptiness, you understand that the object is empty and hence it's only conventional, right? And so that's not a particularly, I mean, this is an important step, but it's a kind of beginner step, right? It's all something we can all do, right? That's not being a Arya Bodhisattva or anything like that. It's just understanding emptiness and realize, oh shit, these objects are not what they look like. They are not real in the sense of what I think is real, right? And that's what you realize just after realizing emptiness. You realize that things are like a dream, like an illusion, and the sutra, the text give many similes, right? As far as seeing the two truths together, that means that all your cognitive impediments have been removed, right? And so that's completely different.
So are you
work.
saying that it's
Then
after
you
the
see-
point of non-duality?
Yeah,
that
then
you
you
then
see things as they
conventional-
are. Whatever that means. I have no idea what it means, right?
I was going to ask you, what does it mean?
I have no idea. It's just the end of you remove all your cognitive impediment, right? And so once you remove your cognitive impediment, presumably you have a rather different view of reality, right? In monastery, we're told it's good to debate about the enlightenment of the Buddha. And so it's a good topic of debate, but don't expect to get any result. But it's still good to do the exercise.
So there's nothing to be said about what
Oh, there is
convention-
plenty of things to be said. There
well-
is books and books and books of things to be said, but at the end of the day, it's inconceivable, right? That's how they describe it. That's how they all say. But the words of the teacher in the monastery is like, don't go to the inconceivable too quickly, struggle with the issue. And then at the end, when you're really tired, you realize it's inconceivable. And because there is value in playing with these notions, right? But yeah, yeah. For us, what we can understand is this in terms of the two truths, right? Which is either we deal with conventional reality and maybe we see it as illusory, or we understand emptiness, right? We kind of purify our mind.
Thank you. It's a help.
Richard? You have a question?
Yeah, I sort of wanted to get back to what Sneh was talking about with the third criterion, because I was wondering, it seemed to me that what you were talking about with the change in the conception of the two truths from Abhidharma to Nagarjuna kind of is related to that, because if in the Abhidharma view, I mean, I'm just speculating here, it sounds to me like the ultimate truth kind of contradicts the conventional truth, that the conventional truth is deceptive and the ultimate truth, that's the real thing.
Yes.
And what this third
I
criterion
wouldn't
is
say
getting
it
at,
contradicts it, but it's, yeah,
yeah, I mean, contradict isn't exactly the right word.
yeah, okay.
But what it is it's not conventional. But then with the Madhyamaka view, there isn't a contradiction. The ultimate analysis will
Yes.
not lead to any difference between
That's
conventional
right.
truth and this ultimate analysis. So
Yeah.
it seems to me that might be related. Is that possible?
Yes,
That
no,
maybe that
exactly.
way of
The
looking-
fact that, you don't have two truths, right? You have conventional objects, and these conventional objects are empty, but it's not the case that you have kind of
Right.
one surface truth and then a deeper truth, right?
So
That's-
so an ultimate analysis wouldn't then contradict it.
But yeah, that's Tsongkhapa's point, is that ultimate analysis does not contradict the object, right? Now, this is a point which is disagreed by Patsap Nimadra and other various thinkers, but I think Tsongkhapa has a good point, right? Which is that conventional objects are not negated by the search for the ultimate. They are emptied, but they're not negated, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, I think, is a helpful way to understand the two truths, right? Which is the way we have to adopt in order to manage our search for what is real, right?
Yeah.
So that our search doesn't go awry.
Do any of these people talk about ethics in
Who, these people?
Bhaviveka or Chandrakirti or Prasad?
Patsap would be the person who would have the greatest difficulty of dealing with that. I don't know enough Bhaviveka to answer that question.
Mhm.
I have read some things, but not enough. In general, I think it's a really interesting area of thinking, because in general, I think the tradition has rested pretty happy with kind of stereotypical answers, like karma is conventional, like everything else. It's like, yeah, okay, I'm not sure what it means in this case, right? Because you're talking about, action that may have been created 200,000 years ago, which influence us now, right? And so it's just like, what does it mean that it's conventionally real? I don't understand. So I think there are some really interesting questions to be raised in the domain of ethics. What I suspect is that ultimately this is all going to come down to scriptures, because it's all of the domain of karma, and therefore beyond the understanding of ordinary human beings such as myself. And therefore, at the end of the day, it just comes down to scripture telling you what you should do and should not do, right?
Thanks.
That's what I suspect.
Stay. You had your hand up, and then Janet, and then Amy.
Thanks, Sunny. So, Professor, your conversation with Richard reminded me of a quote I've heard from Nagarjuna. I think it's Precious Garland, but I'm not sure, which is that emptiness is the womb of compassion.
Is it what?
Emptiness is the womb,
Oh, the
Shunyata
womb.
Karuna Garbha.
Yeah. Okay.
So I've heard that, in the context of explaining that, the realization of emptiness generates like the state of compassion.
Okay.
And I've found it hard to make that link. Like,
yeah. I think, it's an interest. This is the 9th chapter of the Bodhicharyavatara, right? Where this topic is talked about, right? And so there you have an attempt to connect the view of emptiness, the view actually of no self, with compassion, right? And I think my friends, Western scholars, debate whether this is a real argument or whether this is just a way to encourage people to develop their mind in a particular direction. So what I think is that removing this fundamental distinction that we make between self and others is extraordinarily beneficial. And so I think it opens the door to greater compassion. I am not sure that by itself it does it. But given that what the tradition direct us in this way, right? It is certainly the case that given that we are oriented towards considering compassion as one of the key virtue, it's certainly the case that once you undermine this fundamental difference between self and others, you do, this certainly makes you more compassionate, right? So I am doubtful it's automatic, personally, but I think it's, in a way, not the important question. The important question is whether it's helpful to the development of a virtue that is central to the development of the mind. And the answer is yes, obviously yes. And I think that's probably the more helpful way to think about it as being of real help. Whether it generates compassion automatically or not is not really such an interesting question. What is interesting is how we develop. What is important is how we develop our mind, right? But we can still debate, there is no problem debating various topics. It's always fun. But really speaking, this is what is important, right?
Thank you.
Janet, you have a question?
I think Professor Dreyfus answered my question, because I was going to go back to something that Sneh brought up initially, a very practical example of a question in real conventional life. And I had been wondering whether the difference between text and the practice of discovering and rediscovering the emptiness in conventional reality, such that when you study the emptiness of the self-identity, that it does not exist actually, that totally alters your view of everything else in conventional life. And is that the way that in Madhyamaka we approach conventional questions, or do we depend more on text, or is it both?
Well, it's complicated because it is true that as we deepen our understanding of emptiness, we do change our relation to conventional reality. This is, in fact, the goal, right, of the whole practice. So that's true. But, you know, it's always true that we have always a tendency to trust ourselves too much and to give ourselves too much of a pass. And so it's very important to keep relying on the textual tradition, because otherwise it's easy to go, you know, to do things that one shouldn't do. And I think keeping the texts are very important. Obviously, if we were to be fully enlightened, we wouldn't need that, but we don't need to talk about that. We can debate that, but really what we need is to deepen our understanding of emptiness and to keep the precepts and to keep the advice and the teachings of the tradition, because otherwise we might become a bit self-indulgent, right?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
And so that's why I think even if we don't take the text necessarily literally, we have to take them seriously. And in the domain of ethics, particularly because it's very hard to understand what to do, right? That's why we have precepts.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Yes.
And Amy, you have a question?
Well, yes, it's a kind of a question. First, I just want to say thank you for the idea of swimming and, you know, things being where kind of at sea, or not swimming, but maybe at sea.
Hopefully not sinking.
Huh?
Hopefully not sinking.
Hopefully not sinking, yes.
Yes.
But it gives
so let's go with swimming.
I'm sorry?
Keep going.
It's a help against nihilism to think of it that way.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I wanted to say, and then I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off because it sounded like you were going to say something.
No, keep going.
Okay. And so then how does guru devotion play into that?
Well, you know, we are in Madhyamaka. We're not doing Tantra here. So
we're not doing what?
Tantra.
A Tantra. Okay.
Yeah, we're not doing Tantra. We're doing Madhyamaka, which is an extension of basic Buddhism. Now you can say it's Mahayana. As you notice, there is not a single sign that this text is a really Mahayana text. But anyway, we can say it's Mahayana. It's kind of early Mahayana, proto-Mahayana. So we can talk about how to relate to teachers within the context of basic Buddhism. And there I think it's pretty clear that the teacher is bound by ethical precepts and we are bound by ethical precepts. and this take precedence over any kind of consideration. Now, in some Mahayana Sutra, which are later, you have bodhisattva who do things that we shouldn't do, because if we are not bodhisattva, so already there you start to go, it starts to be a little bit more complicated. But basically, the idea of guru devotion at this level, non-tantric level, is a spiritual friend, right? And we should deeply respect that spiritual friend. And, you know, at some point, we might not be able to agree with that person. That can happen. And so if that happens, we should just abstain from breaking our link with that person, from kind of disrespecting that person. And so it's very important that we respect our teachers, but that's the extent to which there is guru devotion in that part of the tradition. Then there is Tantra, and I know nothing about that. So there you are on your own. I know Madhyamaka a little bit, and that's what I'm talking about. And in Madhyamaka, basically my understanding of Madhyamaka is that it's an extension of basic Buddhism. And so in basic Buddhism, that's how you understand your teacher. And it's a very important link, but it doesn't mean that you have to think about your teacher as a fully enlightened being and all these things, which make sense within the domain of Tantra, but I am not talking about that, as I am not competent to talk about Tantra.
Thank you. I don't know whether it's relevant then to ask how does the development of merit help with the understanding of emptiness? I mean, that was really my question. And
okay. Well, I think there are two ways to think about how to generate confidence in the tradition. One is to generate confidence in the tradition on the basis of faith and on the basis of making merit, and then gradually coming to understand emptiness and gain a more deeper trust in the tradition. There is another way, which is to understand first emptiness, and then on that basis, have trust in the tradition and do merits. So in both ways, merits are important, right? Because they make our mind kind of more wholesome, right? They populate our mind with wholesome notions. And so it's helpful whether you understand emptiness first or at the end of the process. For both types of people, it's important to do merit, to take refuge, and to generate compassion, and so on, right? This is the kind of heart quality that we need, as well as wisdom.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's it.
Would anyone like to raise their hand if they have a question or just speak out? Yeah, Janet, go ahead. You're muted. Janet, you're muted.
Thank you. My understanding, and also from what you said, is that in the Madhyamaka tradition, certainly with Nagarjuna. The means of knowledge and knowledge are the same thing. You can't, he doesn't approve of or endorse any kind of system of logic. And so my question is, does this exclude critical thinking? Is there no place for critical thinking and analysis in this system, in his view?
Well, I think you have to take, well, first there are two books, right? There is this book where there is no discussion of knowledge, right? And then there is the Vigraha-Vivartani, which is a refutation of debates where he does talk about knowledge. In Indian term, it's pramana. Now, whether it means correct cognition or whether it means of correct cognition for our purpose, that's not a very important distinction. So now in Vigraha-Vivartani, Nagarjuna does seem to undermine the idea of pramana, though you're right, he doesn't endorse any, for example, list of pramana, right? List of types of knowledge accepted. So it does not do that. Now, what does it mean? Well, that's not sure, right? Maybe it just means that's not what he's talking about, right? What he's talking about is really this process of searching for reality and not finding it, right? And that's basically what he's concerned with. So now, if you want to find a Madhyamaka discussion of pramana, then you need to turn to the followers like Bhava-Viveka, like Chandrakirti, like Tsongkhapa, like many later thinkers who kind of develop Nagarjuna's thoughts and draw the consequences, and they draw consequences differently, right? Some are more keen on pramana, others are less keen on pramana, right? Chandrakirti is relatively cool towards the idea of pramana. Bhava-Viveka puts a lot more of emphasis on pramana, right? And so if you think about what it means to think critically is obviously very important. And then you have to think, well, what is it in conventional reality that kind of allows me to think critically, right? And so this is where Bhava-Viveka and his followers talk about causality, embodiment, various notions that allows us to give some kind of way to understand knowledge, to understand how we can deal with, how we can kind of develop a more accurate view of things, right? Chandrakirti is very cool to that because he thinks that's in danger of reintroducing kind of intrinsic nature, kind of real reality by the back door, right? And so Chandrakirti is very critical of that. Tsongkhapa has an interesting position because Tsongkhapa importantly emphasizes the importance of understanding correctly the conventional, right? And so some Tibetan thinks that Tsongkhapa would have been in better shape if he had claimed to be followers of Bhava-Viveka, than Chandrakirti, but that's obviously highly controversial, and my teachers would not have agreed with that. But Tsongkhapa has his own position in which he strongly emphasized the value of understanding correctly the conventional, right? And one of the main bases for understanding correctly the conventional is dependent origination, particularly causality, right? Because that's maybe not the metaphysical bottom of reality, but that's an extremely important way in which we understand reality at the most basic level, right? And so that would be the base of developing critical thinking. And interestingly enough, scientific endeavor deals also with causality, right? So you would be in good company.
Thank you.
Amy, you have a question?
No, thank you.
Well, that's perfect because I have to have dinner. So I think we're
I
done,
didn't mean
right?
to leave my hand there. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome. All the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Bye.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Really great.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Professor Dreyfus.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.